Welcome back. Today we're talking about a poet whose work is rooted in something incredibly human: emotion. His name is Ed Corbett, and I think what makes his story interesting is how much his writing has evolved over the years. Ed has been writing poetry since he was 18 years old. What's interesting is that his earliest poetry was very different from the work he's creating today. How so? His first poems were inspired by nature. He saw beauty in the world, the color. There's something fitting about that. A young writer seeing beauty in the world and wanting to capture it with words. And there was an important moment early in his journey. After his senior year of high school, Ed took a journal with him on a trip to Ireland. Ireland seems like a pretty inspiring place for someone just beginning to discover poetry. But his poetry didn't stay focused on nature. No. Over the years, his writing changed as he changed. His early poems were often cute, silly, and heavily focused on rhyme. And now his poetry is considerably darker. It reflects the raw emotions people experience throughout their lives.
So, what changed?
Life. Ed has experienced a lot. Those experiences shaped him, and they shaped the poetry he wanted to write. That seems to be one of the defining elements of his work, taking real experiences and turning them into something readers can recognize. Exactly. One of his main goals is to make someone read a poem and think that poem is about me. That's a powerful reaction for a writer to create. And that's really what poetry means to Ed. It's a way to connect with people, share things that might hurt or bring joy, and remind someone that they're not alone. Which brings us to his first published collection, Life's Lessons. The story behind that book is pretty remarkable. Life's Lessons contains poetry written from the time Ed was 18 until he was 42. 24 years of writing? The title represents the growth and life experiences during those years. So the book isn't just a collection of poems, it's also a record of his development as a person and a poet. Exactly. You can look at Life's Lessons as a snapshot of 24 years of life, emotion, growth, and writing. What does Ed hope readers take away from the collection? Connection. He hopes readers can find something within the poems that speaks to their own experiences. Does he have a favorite poem from the book? His favorite is a poem called Breathe, and there's another poem with a particularly personal story behind it, Mama. Yes. Mama holds a special place in his heart. He wrote it about a year after his mother passed away. That kind of personal experience can make a poem difficult to write, but also incredibly meaningful. That's something you'll find throughout Ed's approach to poetry. Personal experiences may inspire the poem, but the emotions can become universal because grief is something many people understand. Exactly. So are love, heartbreak, loneliness, joy, and loss. The details may differ, but the emotions can connect us. Life's Lessons has been available for 3 years. What has happened since then? Ed hasn't exactly been sitting around. Since publishing Life's Lessons, he's completed 2 more poetry collections, each containing 100 poems. 200 poems? 200 poems. And he's already started a 4th collection. That's a lot of writing. It certainly is, and one of those completed collections is called Gospel of Agony. That's quite a title. It definitely grabs your attention. Gospel of Agony is ready for publication, though Ed doesn't have a release date yet. So Life's Lessons may be the book that introduces readers to Ed, but there's plenty more coming. Let's talk about his philosophy on poetry. What makes a poem good? For Ed, a good poem is something a reader can relate to. Technical skill matters, but connection is a major part of what makes a poem meaningful. Does he believe poetry has to rhyme? Not at all. He tends to prefer free-form poetry. He believes poetry can take many different forms. What about storytelling? Does a poem need to tell a story? Not necessarily. Ed thinks stories in poetry can be a great way to keep a reader's attention, but he doesn't believe every poem needs to tell a story. So there isn't one formula for poetry. That's one of Ed's beliefs. Poetry isn't just one thing. It can be many things to many different people. And that's something he's trying to communicate through his website and blog. Ed created his website to build an audience. It's still a work in progress, but the goal is to connect with readers and introduce more people to his writing. What does the blog focus on? He wants to help people discover poetry in a new light. The blog explores different types of poetry and provides prompts people can use to practice their own writing. So he's not just asking people to read poetry, he's encouraging them to try writing it themselves. Exactly. He wants to help people write their own poetry or improve the skills they already have. And he believes anyone can become a poet? Absolutely. His philosophy is simple. Anyone can be a poet. You just have to try. Like most things, writing improves with practice. What about people who are afraid to share their writing? Ed has an interesting answer. He says your poetry doesn't have to be shared at all. You can keep a notebook just for yourself, almost like a journal. I like that. It takes away some of the pressure. Exactly. Write when you can, revisit your old work when you're ready. Poetry can be personal without ever becoming public. Emotion seems to be another major part of Ed's philosophy. It is. One of his main goals when writing is to make people feel. He wants his poetry to reach the reader emotionally. And that brings us back to connection. Yes, that's really the heart of his writing. He wants readers to discover that their emotions aren't theirs alone. But writing isn't always easy. What's been the hardest part of being an author? Finding time, finding motivation, and finding ideas. Those can be difficult for any writer, and Ed is no exception. Has he ever wanted to quit? No. He has taken long breaks and changed projects in the middle of writing them, but he's never actually wanted to quit. That's an important distinction. Sometimes you need to step away from a project without walking away from writing altogether. What's the most rewarding part of writing for him? The feeling of success when he completes a collection of poetry. There's something special about finishing a project that you've spent months or years creating. Absolutely. Especially when you're holding something that started as nothing more than an idea. How does he handle criticism? He's open to constructive criticism. He doesn't expect everyone to love his work or even like it. He understands that every writer has room to improve. That's a healthy attitude. I think so. He'd rather someone tell him how he can improve his writing or make it more appealing than simply tell him they don't like it. And when the ideas aren't coming, where does he find inspiration? Music, mostly, but also his environment. That actually makes sense for an emotion-driven poet. Music can create an emotional response before you even put words to it. Exactly. Sometimes the emotion comes first and the poem follows. So what's next for Ed Corbett? Right now, he's focused on promoting Life's Lessons. His hope is to use the sales from that book to help fund the publication of his next work, which will be Gospel of Agony. That's one of the books waiting in the wings. He also has another completed collection and a fourth collection already underway. And the blog is continuing as well? Yes. New blog posts are available every Friday at noon Central. The goal is to keep helping readers discover different forms of poetry and develop their own writing. Ultimately, what does Ed want from all of this? He wants his books to reach as many people as possible. More specifically, he wants to build a solid following of readers, a real fan base, people who don't just buy one book, but connect with the work and come back for more. Exactly. And I think that's what makes his journey interesting. He's not simply trying to publish books, he's trying to build connections with readers. From the 18-year-old writing about nature to the contemporary poet writing about heartbreak, grief, love, loss, and the complicated emotions of being human. 24 years of poetry became life's lessons, and now there are hundreds of new poems waiting behind it. It sounds like Ed Corbett's writing journey is still just getting started. That's the most interesting part. We know where the journey began, but we don't know where it will take him next. What we do know is that his goal remains the same, to make people feel and to remind readers that they're not alone. And if you're looking for poetry that explores real emotions and experiences, Ed Corbett's work is worth discovering. Start with Life's Lessons, explore his poetry blog, and keep an eye out for Gospel of Agony, because somewhere in those poems, there may be a line, a feeling, or an experience that makes you stop and think, that poem is about me.